Okay, welcome back everybody. So we're going to move on to part 2 of our little Defender clone thing. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to add a couple of actions to our player here. The two actions I want to do is, number one, I want to make it so it can shoot a laser. And number two is I want to give it this odd, freaky little light speed or hyperspace kind of capability where you push a button and it's just going to jump some random place on the screen. Not really sure it helps the player, but maybe it does. You know, if you're being surrounded by bad guys, it gives you an option. Okay, so the basic idea of how this is going to work is I'm going to have a state machine. I'm going to call it actions, and it's going to basically store. It's going to respond to actions. When the player pushes the fire button, it's going to launch a laser. When the player pushes the hyperspace button, it's going to jump the player to a hyperspace location. A random location. So that's how we're going to do this. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll add a component, do a PlayMaker, PlayMaker FSM, and I'm going to call this one actions. So that'll be the name of this state machine. See if I get my headphones so that they're not like hanging over the top of my keyboard. That'd be really nice for a change. Okay, there we go. I can deal with that. Okay, so I'm going to call that actions with an S plural. Let's do an edit on that and get things set up in here. So my first one is going to be, I'm going to call it waiting or no action. Yeah, let's call it no action. It's just kind of hanging out there. No action. I'm going to add a state. This is going to be a fire laser. And then I'm going to add another state. And this other state is going to be a hyperspace jump. There we go. Alright, looks good. And I got a weird yeah, I know you can't actually see what I'm doing. I got a weird spot on my screen that I was trying to clean off. That was awkward. Okay, so I'm going to go to events, add a couple events. Now, to go from hyperspace jump or fire laser back to no action, I actually want to pause a delay, so I'm not going to be using a finished event. I'm going to create an event for that. I'm going to call it completed. Kind of like finished, you know, same meaning. Let's see, start laser and start jump will be my other events. So let's connect these guys. So I'm going to have a completed from laser back to no action, and a completed from hyperspace jump back to no action, and a start jump goes down to hyperspace jump. And an add transition, what do we want to do? Start laser will go up to fire laser. Okay. So there we go. We're off and going. Alright, next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to do do a couple of different approaches to this in here. First one is I'm just going to get my hyperspace jump working. So let's go with an action browser. And I'm going to do a get button. And basically, if I use this get button down, sends an event when a button is pressed. Sends what the event you want to do, and I can store it, which I don't need to store it. So I'm going to use that one. And the button name I want to use, well, I'm going to have to specify this. I'm going to use jump. Now, I have the advantage of kind of knowing my way around the project settings here. So if I go to edit project settings and input, I have... And we used horizontal and vertical before, but I've got a jump right here, and that's going to be my space bar. So I'm going to use the space bar, and then for shooting, I'm going to use the fire 1, which is left control. I'm kind of tempted to maybe change those around, but yeah, I mean, I could simply change fire to space. You know, I'm going to do that actually while I'm here. So fire 1 just became space, and jump just became, what do I want it to be? Left control, I'm thinking? Or, yeah, let's do left CTRL, I think is what it is. Or I could do left shift. Either one of those would work. I'm going to do left shift on this. Not that it really matters. Left shift. There we go. Okay, so my shooting my laser will be the space bar, and my hyperspace jump is going to be my left shift. And I've specified those here within my input manager. And to access either one of those, I just use the name of the axis I'm interested in. Now notice I said the name of the axis. This is going to be important for what I'm going to do next. So even though I'm using get button, and yeah, this is a button, and this is a button, it's also an axis, which means our axis event we used earlier, I can use that too. So anyway, let's go back to our player ship. And so, like I said, I'm going to do this two different ways. So I'm going to start off with button name, jump, and that is going to be start jump. Nice. And we're going to come down here to start jump to our hyperspace jump. And here's what we're going to do in our hyperspace jump. We're going to pick some random values. So I'm going to need two random values. I'm going to need a get random. Nope, that's not doing it. Let's do a random. Let's try to spell correctly. Random. I want a random float. And I know it's a float. Remember when we were doing our POSX and POSY with our player movements, those were float values, so I'm going to need float again. Okay, so one of these is going to be a POSX, my random X position, and the other one will be my random Y position, new variable, POSY. Alright, so now I just need to know my values. So let's take a look at what we have. Now, if we happen to remember what we used for our movement, well, that's going to make it easy, but I don't remember. So I'm going to take a look here. For my Y, I'm going to say like right about here, I'm going to say 4. That's what I'm going to say, positive 4 to negative 4, basically. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm going to use. So you kind of can't jump to immediate borders. And this way, I'm going to say 7. Yeah, I'm going to say 7 to 7. There we go. Alright, so those are going to be my values. So for my positive Y right here, minimum is negative 4, positive is 4. For my positive X, minimum is negative 7, positive is 7. And then we're going to do an action browser set position. And our position is going to be set based on these values. So my X is going to be POSX. My Y is going to be POSY. I'm just going to do this once. And then finally, I'm going to have a wait on here. So they can't be doing this hyperspace jump all the time. You can't be spamming this. So I'm going to say you have to wait. I'm going to require them to wait 1.5 seconds between hyperspace jumps. And then once this pause down here is done, I'm going to go ahead and fire the finished event, which will be completed, and that will allow it to come back here and then process that again. Now, hopefully you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, wait a second. What if they are, they do the hyperspace jump and they want to shoot? Is this going to work? Let's come back to that because we might have a problem. So we're just going to go, one step at a time. All right, so let me go ahead and play this. I can still move, left shift. I'm pressing left shift, but it's not letting me do anything except every 1.5 seconds. Sticky keys. Do you want to turn on sticky? No. There we go. Okay, so you can see how this random thing is working. So I'm jumping around every 1.5 seconds. Now here is what I was talking about. See, it's down here. So if I'm pressing my fire, it won't work. Right? So we're going to have to come up with another way of approaching this. And it turns out there are other ways of approaching this. So, we'll get that set up. All right, so that's working. All right, so what other way could I possibly use to do this? Well, like I said, let's come back to that in a few minutes. Don't want to overcomplicate that just yet. All right, so next up, we are going to go to we're going to fire laser. Now, in order to fire laser, I'm going to need a laser that I can fire. So I'm going to go to game object, 3D object, and a capsule, like so. So this is going to be my laser, so I'm going to go ahead and call this. I'm going to call it player laser. I'm going to give this a tag because I'm going to be using tags later on with collision, so I'll go ahead and give it a tag. My tag is also going to be player laser, like so. Go back to capsule right here. Dang it. Player laser for my name. Change my tag now to player laser tag. Okay, this all looks cool. The capsule collider, I'll use that. I'm going to set it up to be a trigger. Everything looks fine. So now I need to make my laser look a little bit more interesting. So let's go with a create material, and I'm going to call this material player laser MAT for material. And let's see, I want the player's laser to be green. So I'm going to come up here to my albedo channel and let's let's make it greeny. Alright, let's do one of those. Nice. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and apply this material to my player laser. Like so. There we go. And let's play around with some more stuff we've got here. I'm going to crank up my metallic. Something like so. Liking that. I'm going to give myself an emissive here. What color emissive do I want? I don't know. Let's kind of play around with this. See if I can find an emissive that I like. Kind of liking that one right there. Oh, that was black. That's not really an emissive. Let me crank this down a little bit. Do something maybe a little bit like that. And yeah, I can probably deal with this. Crank this up just a little bit more. Okay. All right. Yeah, I kind of like that. A little lasery. I'm going to go ahead and scale this thing now. So let's select this, get this small enough so it looks, it's got a, kind of, comes out of our ship over here. Let's make it a little bit longer. Alright, yeah, I'm going to call that my laser, okay? And my laser is by default going to have a state machine that controls its movement. It's going to move up, down, right? Or it's going to move, I'm sorry, not up, down. I'm going to make it move on its positive y axis, because that's what I want it to do. And that is, as far as it's concerned, it's going to be moving up, down, but I'm going to change things around. So I'm going to go into my add component here. I'm on my player laser. Go down to PlayMaker, PlayMaker FSM, and I'm going to call this, oops, I'm going to open it up again. I'm going to call this movement, like so. Cool. Alright, so with my movement in place, let's edit this thing. Let's come over here. I'm going to have a move, whatever. Don't really have anything else to call it. I'm going to call it move. I'm going to go with an action browser. I'm going to use translate, and I'm really trying to keep using the same actions that we've used before. I want to move it on the Y, so I'm going to use a variable. I'm going to call this variable speed so I can change it. It's going to move in self space. Remember, I said this time I want it to move along its Y axis as opposed to the world's. And this is going to allow me to orient this thing however I want, and so long as this Y is pointing in the direction I want it to go, off it goes. And so yeah, and I'm going to move every frame. There we go. So this should cover his movement. Let's go to our variables, hit our speed, make sure it's an inspector, like so, and come over here. Let me get rid of this for a second. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a speed of 1, which is obviously going to be way too slow, but this is just to see how this is working out. And let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. Our laser's off and going, right? Cool. Looks nice. Alright, so next up, going back to, well, actually, next up is I'm going to create a prefab out of this. To make a prefab, you take your laser, you drag it down here, and now you have a prefab, which means I can get rid of this in my scene. Whenever we create an object in game, which is called instantiate an object, we can only create or instantiate objects that are prefab, so they have to be down here in our project. Okay, so when we create an object, let's go back into our ship here, and let's go ahead and solve this problem. And I'm going to solve it the really easy way. There's complex ways, but I'm going to do this an easy way. So I'm going to make this action, or this state machine, I'm going to call this one jump. Yeah, I'm going to call this one jump. And then I'm going to hit that gear, copy that component, add a component, PlayMaker FSM. I'm going to hit this gear right here. I'm going to paste component values. But for this jump, I'm going to call this one shoot. So instead of jump, it's shoot. Okay, so now let's go back into here. So we've got, I'm in my jump state machine, right? So I'm going to get rid of fire laser. I'm going to get rid of start laser. Delete transition. There we go. So that's all this state machine is going to do, is just going to handle my jump. And that got rid of dealing with this completed time thing. And in all fairness, there's some other things I can do to handle this. but this is just going to be a little bit easier. Sometimes if there's an easy solution, use it. Okay, so that's my jump. So now let's change that and go to our shoot state machine. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I don't need the jump. I don't need my start jump. I'll delete that transition, which also means I don't need get button down. All right, so the question is now going to be, how do I go about going from no action to firing a laser? So let's go to our action browser, and what I'm going to use is going to be an axis event. Now this seems incredibly counterintuitive because you see that I have a horizontal and vertical axis. Well, here's the thing. I can call these whatever I want. So for my horizontal axis, I'm going to call this fire 1 because I can. Okay? Now, right event is going to be the positive of this. Left event is going to be the negative of this. So the positive event, the positive thing, the positive button for this axis was actually pushing the button. That was the positive one. So I'm going to make this a start laser. And this is going to be a really, really easy way to be able to, if they're holding down the key, they can hold down the key and it'll fire constantly instead of having to spam the key and tapping it repeatedly. Now I can do this also with the button, where I get the button, get the status of the button stored as a Boolean variable and do a Boolean check. You know, not difficult to do. It's going to be 3 actions, not the end of the world, but I can do it. This at the same time also does what I want. Okay, so I've got that. So now I'm going to come over to my fire laser, and I'm going to go ahead and fire a laser. So how do I create a laser? How do I instantiate a laser? Well, if I go to create, I have a create object. I'm going to add this action to our state. Okay, so here's what we've got. We have, what game object do we want to create? I'm going to make a variable for this. And this variable is going to be a new variable, and I'm going to call this laser. Where do we want this object to start at? Where do we want it to spawn at? I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call this spawn point. Position, rotation, all of these are none. Okay, I don't care about those. As far as the laser moving, that's already inside the laser. So as soon as the laser shows up, boom, off it goes. It's doing its thing. These variables, I want these to be public. I want them to be inspector, so that way I can assign them easily. So my laser is an inspector. My spawn point is an inspector. Now while I'm here, notice POSX and POSY, they're not being used. I'm going to go ahead and delete them. If I'm not using them, I don't need them. Go to my events. Notice start jump, not being used. I'll go ahead and delete it. And I can clean up my jump state machine this same way. Okay, so then the last thing is I want another action here. I want another wait. And this wait is going to be, actually, you know what, let's not do that yet. We'll do that in a minute. Okay, so coming back, get rid of this. Going back to my player ship right here, go down and shoot. I need a laser, so the laser I want is going to be this one. Now the cool thing about using the variables and why this is so very important for us to get in the habit of doing, because I could have just drugged this over into my action and it would have worked. And that's a very common thing to do. But the power here is if I ever decide I want to shoot something other than a laser, I change it right here. I don't load up PlayMaker. I don't load up my state machine. It gets changed right here. Same thing with this spawn point. Okay, so I need a spawn point. Well then let's make one. I'm going to go with a game object. I'm going to do a 3D object because it's easy to see. There's my cube. I'm going to move this cube over here, kind of nestle it in front of the player because I want it to like shoot out of where the player is, I think. You know, I might tweak this a little bit. And let's see, let's go ahead and scale this cube down some. It really doesn't need to be that big, not that it matters. Maybe like that. But by scaling it down, it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of see how I might want to position it. Okay. Oops. There we go. Go down. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so let's go ahead and play this, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to fire with my spacebar. Okay, it made one there. And it's still going, but that's a different problem. Where's my ship? Oh, I'm being dumb. Let me show you what I'm being dumb about. I'm not hitting my completed here. So yeah, I do have to do this wait. Let's go ahead and turn this wait on. And right now, I'm going to create a variable for this. I'm going to call this shoot delay, and this is going to be in real time. Alright, so coming back over here, scroll down, we should have a shoot delay. Oops, I gotta make it an inspector, don't I? Variables, shoot delay, make it an inspector. There we go. Coming over here, I'm gonna make a delay of 0.25, okay? Alrighty, let's see here. Okay, now, off we go. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so why is the laser spawning there and not over here? Hopefully you know the answer. You're looking at this, you're like, well, I know the answer. And yeah, I know, you can't tell me. So here's what it is. Notice spawn point is still set to none. So where's it spawning? It's spawning at 0, 0, 0. Where I want it to spawn is this cube I just made. So I'm going to select PlayMaker. I'm going to select player ship, drag the cube. Oh, come on. Drag the cube. There we go. And drag the cube down onto this right there. And then the next thing is I want to change this name to laser spawn point, like so. Alright, so now let's see what we got. Okay, so there goes my laser. Notice it's moving up. Well, I want it to move this way. So this is kind of the rationale behind why I wanted to have my laser moving in its local space. Because now all I have to do is its spawn point is line it up so that the green arrow of the spawn point is pointing in the direction I want the laser to go. So I will rotate this guy. And that's going to be negative 90 degrees right there. Alright, now check this out. See, the arrow's pointing that way. That is how this thing is now oriented. And now my laser is still going in its positive Y direction, which it got from when it got spawned here, and it was oriented to the way this guy is. And it's like, hey, that's the way I should go, so I'm going to go. And off it goes. Alright, so let's see here. Let me get back. And I'm still only firing one laser, which is fine. Because over here in my weight, I don't have my completed finish. Okay, there we go. Alright, so let's do a little bit of tweaking here to our laser. Just a couple of minor things. Okay, so my 0.25, you see how I can make this wall of laser death? That's not so cool. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my delay. Let's try a 0.5. Sorry about that. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. And there's that delay. Still too much of a delay. Or not enough of a delay, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to 1. There we go, and that's that delay. So, you know, basically find a delay that you like. I'm going to go with like 1.25. Okay? Alright, next thing is I need my cube to do 2 things. One of which is I need it to be invisible. So I'm going to hit my laser spawn point, turn off my mesh render. Invisible. Cool. Next thing is I need it to follow my player wherever I go. So I'm going to take my laser spawn point and drop it on a player ship. So now it's a child of that. So now when I play, there we go. I'm shooting. And I'm still shooting. I can outrun my lasers. Isn't that cool? Okay, there we go. Alright, next problem. My lasers, they are way too slow. So let's go down to our laser right about here, and what do you think? Maybe, how about a speed of 6? Let's see what that does. Kind of play around with our speed, find one that we like. Not bad. Maybe a little faster. How about an 8? Maybe a 10. Find a speed that we like. Okay, yeah, you know, like I can deal with this 10. Okay, nice. I'm liking that. Alright, next up. My lasers, zoom out over here, never destroy themselves, okay? What I'm saying is that as I fire them, they get off screen and they keep going. And they still exist. And this is not good because technically I'm using memory. Alright, so what I want to do is have my lasers automatically destroy themselves when they're off the screen. several ways to do it. I'm going to use a boundary around my screen to do it. So I'm going to go 3D object. I'm going to go with a cube. I'm going to make this cube surround my game. Something like that maybe. Let's put it back here to a 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to go ahead and knock these numbers. I like whole numbers. I don't want to rotate. 20, 20, 20. There we go. And I don't even need a complete cube, so I'm going to scale you down. Maybe like that. So what, you are a 12. There we go. All right, nice. Now this cube has a box collider. I'm going to make that a trigger. I'm also going to make it invisible, like so. Now I need to tag this thing. I'm going to even give it a name. I'm going to call it my game boundary. This is going to be my name, and then I'm going to give it a tag. So I'm going to go down here to add tag, and I'm going to add a tag, and I'm going to call this boundary. Go back to my game boundary, which is right here, and let's do a boundary tag. Alright, now coming back down to our player laser. We're going to need a new state, add state, and this state is going to be delete me. So it's going to get rid of me, so I'm not in the memory anymore. I'm going to need a new event, and this new event is going to be crossed boundary, like so. So I'm going to go from move, add transition, crossed boundary over here to delete me. Inside delete me, I just want to delete me. So the way to actually do that is with something called destroy, and destroy self. That's what I want. Like so. So that's going to delete me. So now all I have to do is detect when I leave the boundary. Alright. So what I'm going to need two things. Number one is, in order for triggers collisions to work, we need to use the physics system, because collisions are calculated through physics. So to use the physics system, I'm going to go with an add component, physics, and add a rigid body. This is what I need for physics. Now the thing with here though is that I don't want physics doing gravity. Doesn't need to. And down here under constraints, this is where if I have two objects collide, I have a car collide with a wall, for instance, I can have the physics calculate how the car would rotate and bounce off of the wall if I wanted, using the position rotation. I don't want my physics system doing anything at all. So I'm freezing all of those and I'm turning off my gravity. It is simply there to say, hey, we collided. That's kind of all I care about. So I'm going to come back over here to my move inside my laser, do an action browser, and what I want is called a trigger event right here. And this, we have several different types, but what I care about is I can either have an event when I enter a collision area, when I stay within a collision area, or when I exit a collision area. Now if you think about it, what I'm worried about is when I exit this green box, that box that I put around there. When I exit my boundary, I want to go ahead and delete myself. So what I'm going to use here for my trigger event is I'm going to use an on-trigger exit. The tag I'm worried about is boundary, and what I want to do when that happens is I want to fire this cross boundary event, which is going to take me down here and to kill myself, delete myself. Right. Let's see how that works. Hopefully that works. Let's see if see? And he deletes himself right here. At the point he crosses the boundary, it's gone. And we can kind of verify this a little bit by selecting our game boundary. So now we can see our boundary, and we can see where they get deleted. They get deleted once they're done crossing the boundary. So now I don't have to worry about them going anywhere else. Now the interesting thing with this system is if I were to add a power up to this where the player can shoot in all four directions at one time, I don't have to add boundaries to the top, to the bottom, to the left, because it's already there. Anytime this laser leaves this green boundary, it gets destroyed. I don't care what direction the laser was going, it doesn't matter. All that matters is once it leaves that. Okay, so what we've got, we can jump around. We can fire our lasers. So we're making good progress. And yeah, we're liking this. So one final little touch here at this point is, you know, our state labels are starting to get a little annoying to deal with here. They're good for debugging and whatnot, but so what I can do is go up to my PlayMaker GUI, and I'm just going to disable my PlayMaker GUI right there, and notice my labels are now gone. Alright, so we're starting to get something going on here. So our player can move around, he can shoot, and yeah, we're having some fun. Okay, so hey, that's the end of part 2. Got any questions, just drop them down below. Coming up next in part 3 is I'm going to add a background to this so it actually starts looking like my player is moving, which is going to be nice. And once I do that, might even throw in a little particle system. No, I'll add particles later once we do explosions and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, so having fun. Alright, so bye-bye.